Grand Seiko is one of those weird brands that seems to split the community. They aren't quite as divisive as Rolex, but they seem to have a loyal, devoted follower and customer base. Those people who swear by Grand Seiko, and they have full out drank the Grand Seiko Kool-Aid. And then there's just the rest of us. I've never had anything against Grand Seiko. Like, if you liked them, all the power to you. I just kind of felt like they weren't for me. But recently I've started growing an interest in Grand Seiko, researching them more and getting hands-on with a couple of pieces. And I think I'm converted. I don't think I'm quite ready to full out drink the Kool-Aid, but I'm ready to get pamphlets on the cult to maybe think about joining one day. Here's how Grand Seiko has been winning me over. You wouldn't be able to look at my collection and initially see this, but I've always been a huge fan of the underdog. Hyping up Rolex is like going to a casino and cheering for the house. And part of the Grand Seiko charm is the heritage. When you buy a watch, you're buying more than a watch. You're buying into a story and what that story says about you. Wearing the Rolex Explorer says something about you, or wearing a Patek Philippe Aquanaut says something about you. Watch brands have been beating the drum of heritage so hard, and they've been sprinkling in a few little white lies. Well, lies is such a harsh word. Should we say embellishments? And that has cheapened this whole idea of heritage. We're looking at you, Explorer. We know you didn't go up Everest. But when you're looking at a Seiko or a Grand Seiko, you are looking at a watch brand that really did revolutionize wristwatches and change the wristwatch landscape forever. Not many brands can say that. Seiko and Grand Seiko have enough heritage to sit up there with the greats. Founded in 1881, Seiko is only 6 years younger than AP, and it's 24 years older than Rolex. Seiko founder Kintaro Hattori was fascinated by and admired the Swiss monopoly of watchmaking, and he wanted to have his Seiko Sha clocks and watches to be recognized by his fellows in Switzerland. And by 1969, Seiko had changed the horology landscape forever by introducing the first ever quartz watch, the Seiko Astron. The 1969 Christmas present from Japan proved a nearly fatal blow to the Swiss watch industry.
Because everything was gearing towards the quartz.
That by 1978, quartz watches overtook mechanical watches in popularity.
Maybe someday all watches will be made this way.
If you're quite interested in the quartz crisis, I have an entire video on it. I'll link it down below or in the corner here or something. It's a bit old, that video, really. I could do with updating it. But this is neither here nor there. So anyway, some people hold this part of Seiko's history as like a bad thing or a wrong thing. This dirty part of watch collecting that almost ruined Switzerland. When really, Seiko was just beating Switzerland at their own game. In the 1950s and 60s, Patek Philippe, Omega, Piaget were all experimenting with quartz-powered wristwatches. Seiko just beat the others to it and marketed themselves exceptionally. Nonetheless, I won't get too into quartz in this video, although I can't think of a bigger, more pivotal moment in the history of wristwatches. Oh, and I need to share my favorite ever Grand Seiko story with you guys. I'm sure you already know it, but I'm gonna share it anyways. So Grand Seiko was founded in 1960 to compete with Switzerland in the high-end market. And they took competing with Switzerland quite seriously. They wanted to win the Swiss Observatory Trial Accuracy Competition. This could almost be like a movie plot. So by 1963, Seiko had placed 10th. By 1966, 9th. By 1967, 4th. Then the trials were cancelled. So in 1968, Seiko entered the Concours de Genève, organized by the Observatory of Geneva. Seiko took 4th to 10th place, so 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, in the wristwatch movement category, with 1st, 2nd, and 3rd place watches having the Quartz Beta 21 movement. Meaning that Seiko, that little nobody from Japan, had just created the best and most accurate mechanical movements. After Seiko's victories in 1968, the Geneva Observatory then threw all of its toys out of the pram, said it was rigged, and denied any of this happening. Okay, that's a lie, but it cancelled all of its future contests, ending the long tradition of the Swiss Observatory timing trials, which is European for
Screw you guys, I'm going home.
It's badass stories like these that make me want to buy a Grand Seiko. I love what these represent. I love what wearing one of these says about a person. The heritage we're joining in on is the underdog who is snubbed by snobs, but offering phenomenal watches that are worth bragging about and can compete with the best. I've always thought the watch industry is quite comparable to the automotive industry. Slow changing, highly traditional, beloved with enthusiasts who scrutinize every detail. And just like Tesla has recently shaken up the automotive industry, for better or for worse, Grand Seiko has innovated within an industry that we so rarely see any big notable innovations. For Rolex, innovation comes in the form of adding a millimeter to the case or like 5 hours of power reserve. But hey, that's nothing to turn your nose up at. I am a Rolex fangirl. But when Grand Seiko innovates, we actually see change. Obviously, there's the quartz innovations of the 1950s and 60s, but the best example of this is in the spring drive movement. So the spring drive movement is a marriage of the mechanical and quartz movement. It's almost like the best of both worlds, the accuracy of quartz and the endless power supply of mechanical. So if you look at a spring drive movement, you see everything you expect to see within a mechanical movement. But there's something funky going on beneath the surface. It gets its power the same way all mechanical watches do, from the winding and uncoiling of the mainspring down through the gear chain. It would then traditionally go to the balance wheel and escapement, but in the spring drive movement, it goes into the glide wheel and the tri-synchro regulator. I'm not going to go too deep in on this because other YouTubers have already done it and they did it far better than I ever could. But it essentially creates a mechanical watch that is regulated by quartz and magnets rather than the traditional escapement, creating a deliciously smooth seconds hand. I think it's less seeing a Grand Seiko in person and more properly spending time with one of these watches. I recently borrowed the SBGH269 shunbun and the SBGH269 Heritage Autumn Hi-Beat from my friends The Watchbox Diary and Time to Loom. And this was the final nail in the coffin for me. This was when I was like, okay, let's go check out these pamphlets for joining the cult of Grand Seiko. Let's just go in and talk to the people. We've talked about their heritage and innovations, but there's something so special about just looking at one of these watches, just holding it in your hand, putting it on the wrist. And it's like, ooh, okay, now that's how you do a watch. The first thing that brings you in is the dial. Whether it's a snowflake, a shunbun, or something else like the Elegance GMT, the dial is just always perfection. Next, my eye goes to the hands, perfectly finished, sharp and aggressive, but also so refined. On the SBGH269, it's quite a contrast between that like delicate, whimsical dial and then those sharp hands and the Zaratsu finishing on the case. I could honestly just witter on about this all day long. But they have a really deep catalog of dressier and sportier watch offerings. And because of all these things, I can truly see the hype and the excitement that's built around Grand Seiko. And I want to join the cult. The more I see these watches, the more I research the brand, the more excited I get for the future of Grand Seiko, and I want to be a part of that future. Anyways, as always, guys, I want to hear from you. What do you guys think to Grand Seiko? Do you love them? Do you hate them? Do you have one? I would love to hear everything, all of your experience in those comments down below. And as always, don't forget to do all those awesome things to feed the YouTube algorithm gods. Give this video a like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. I love watching my channel grow. We've just hit over 20,000 subscribers now, which is much bigger than I ever thought this weird watch channel would ever be. So thank you so much. And until next time, you beautiful, fabulous, wonderful watch nerds. Bye, guys.